Welcome back to our conversation with Amy Carnevale. She's chair of the Massachusetts Republican Party. So, Amy, this past week, we saw former President Trump in an interview with our sister station in Pittsburgh indicate that he's looking at access to contraception and federal policies regarding that, and might have something to say soon. Then later the same day, he basically walked that back. Politico reports that there's this think tank close to the former president that's developing a bunch of sort of what they call Christian nationalist plans for the administration if he's returned to office, spearheaded by someone named Russell Vought, who was director of the Office of Management and Budget in the Trump first term, and is being touted as a possible chief of staff in the second Trump White House. He's part of a group who have advocated for overturning same-sex marriage, ending abortion, and reducing access to contraceptives. Do you and other Massachusetts Republicans support any of that? So,
same-sex marriage has been the law of the land in Massachusetts for many years. It's well entrenched. I don't see that changing anytime soon. And here at the party, we respect the law of the land in Massachusetts, and that's, you know, that will continue to be our position. And clearly, the voters in Massachusetts, as well as the legislature, are strongly in favor of that position. So that's something that we would respect.
What about this contraception issue? Is that something on your radar?
So that came as a surprise to me yesterday. Okay. I'm a little unclear as to what may or may not be being proposed or considered, so it's a little premature.
Well,
I think,
some states want to, yeah, you know, there's a widespread Republican opposition to the morning after pill, the self-administered abortion, essentially. But some states are talking about banning IUDs and...
Yeah, again, I don't see in Massachusetts. I think the right to contraception is well established here, and I frankly don't see that changing.
The former president also gave a long interview to Time magazine recently, in which he talked about plans for a second term should he win, including carrying out a deportation operation of more than 11 million people, building migrant detention camps, letting red states monitor women's pregnancies, firing U.S. attorneys who don't carry out his order to prosecute someone, pardoning all the January 6th convicts, etc. What did you make of that?
So, when I think about Trump presidency, I think about the economy under President Trump when he was serving 2016, 2017, 2018, and the economy was much better than what we're seeing today under Joe Biden. So that's really what I think about as a Republican, and I think many residents of Massachusetts and across the nation want to get back in a position where we can have a more robust economy, where we're developing our natural resources to bring down the cost of fuel and gasoline and have a more robust economy. So I think that's really what drives me, and I think what drives a lot of other individuals in Massachusetts to support Donald Trump in his presidency.
Well, does this give you pause?
Again, I look back on what Donald Trump achieved when he was president, and that's really what I'm looking at, and as opposed to the economy under Joe Biden. And I think that contrast is stark. And again, that's really why I support Donald Trump and his candidacy for president.
Well, we've got, what is it, about 6 months to go here?
Yes.
You want to make a prediction about how Republicans are going to do here in this state?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think Republicans are going to do incredibly well. Again, presidential election years are often very tough for Republicans, but I predict we're going to add to our seats, both in the State House and the State Senate, and build upon the gains that we made last year.
So a lot of voters going to the polls maybe to vote Democrat for president in federal office, but not at the legislative level. That's what you're looking for.
I think, again, we're looking to make gains in the legislature, and that's our priority. So,
good luck to you.
Thank you.